earlier today. People who did not make it, some who did. And this person here was a person who was pretty much taken to the hospital, rescued by our Chopper 2. This poor man was burned over a considerable part of his body. There were no choppers to get him to the hospital. It was impossible to get an ambulance for where he was to the hospital, and so Chopper 2 landed in the back of this area where he was found, choppered him out, took him to the hospital, and he is in stable condition, largely because this chopper flight took minutes instead of hours.
Yeah. Thanks to
He's okay.
quick thinking by Bob Turr. And by the way, Bob Turr has done this. This is not the first time for him. He's rescued a lot of folks from a lot of situations over his many years as a chopper pilot.
His name is John. He apparently had a propane tank that exploded in front of him. And that's how he suffered all those burns.
Well, Bob Turr is still busy. He hasn't stopped yet. I don't know if you stopped for fuel. You must have put tennis at some point or another, Bob Turr, but what are you showing us now?
Well, this is a water tank off Mulholland Highway here in just above the Hollywood Hills. Now, this tank serviced the area, so if you're without water, this is possibly why this tank was ruptured, it split, and as we come around the other side, the water was emptied. Now, Department of Water and Power people are on scene. They're taking a site survey, but unfortunately, the water went racing down the hill over to this side, and we'll get in a little bit better position here. As we come around here, the water went racing down here through this area into the hillside and then down off across Mulholland Highway here. So this was used by the residents of this area for water, and I don't think they're going to get some water tonight. I think it's going to be a little bit before they're able to go there and put that back together, maybe months, and I don't know what they're going to do in the meantime. I'm sure the Department of Water and Power can do some sort of alleviate the problem somehow, but you can see the problem. You can see the workers down here now, and that's really after the shaking stops, you still have all these problems with respect to water tanks, reservoirs, and things of that nature, and this is a real problem for the folks out here.
Very quickly, can you give us the location, Mulholland Highway and what?
Well, I don't know what the cross street here is, but I'll get it for you. Let me see. Let me zoom on in.
What area of town are you in?
Oh, it's basically
we're just feeling
Benedict Canyon.
Actually, we're just feeling that. This is a good, strong aftershock, and man, I'll tell you, things are shaking in the studio right now. I guarantee you felt that anywhere in the Southland. That's a live shot
That had to have been a 5-something, don't you think?
Yes, that was one of the larger aftershocks that we have had since this morning's initial 6.6. And we did hear from Caltech to expect a series of these 5, perhaps even larger, over the next 72 hours. This is one of those, I would guess, 5 or largers.
A very, very strong jolt, and then, of course, it feels like we're sort of on a seesaw. We're looking at this pool here, and you can see the waves in that pool from the aftershock on the edge of the cliff here, and clearly an indication that we've had another aftershock. That's a very graphic picture here.
Now let me pan a little wider.
Bob, you didn't feel that, did you?
No.
Trust us, we felt it.
I feel for you, though, but when we're in the Santa Ana wind conditions, you don't feel it, do you?
No.
But listen, we actually can see a lot of dust. Now, what you're seeing is almost like a smoggy day in Southern California. And what it is there's so much dust and smoke from the fires that we had. Also, every time we have an earthquake or an aftershock, these hills put up a lot of dust. And we saw that in Eaton Canyon. We've also seen it out in the San Fernando Valley. And that's what all this particulate in the air is. And it'll actually make the weather a little bit cooler and change our weather conditions, because literally millions of tons of dirt are now climbing up and smoke climbing up in our atmosphere over Southern California. So it's going to be a little bit cooler. In fact, let me put the camera back on my shoulder and I'll show you the coastline in Santa Monica. We're actually getting that heavy marine layer fog moving in right now. So I wanted to show you Pacific Coast Highway. The old Charles Lawton home at Chautauqua and Pacific Coast Highway literally came apart. The whole bedroom section fell down on the Pacific Coast Highway this morning. Fortunately, I don't think anyone was killed in that incident, although the home was occupied. So the marine layer has moved back in, and except for those occasional aftershocks, it's really hard to tell that we had an earthquake from a picture that, like the picture I'm showing you.
Yeah, it really is. But you make a good point about the dust in the air that always, because there's still landslides going on, still loose stuff falling down. And every time we have a pretty big aftershock, that was a pretty big one. You can see clouds of dust on the horizon.
That's right. Just looking into the center of the pool, you can see the waves. And actually, before you mentioned it, I was able to see those waves. And it looked like it took you, a few seconds to transmit the Earth movement over to Hollywood. where you felt it, but it was very, very interesting from our perspective.
Bob, that was strong enough, and you know, hopefully we'll get a reading on the Richter reading on that one shortly, and it's still going on. That I would assume that might have even done some new damage to any structures that were you know, at all compromised because of the initial shock and the shocks after. And I'm wondering, as you fly around, if you notice anything that looks like it might be fresh damage.
Chris, we're going to, while we're on the line here, we're going to race over here just about a minute or so away, and we're going to take a look at some homes that suffered some extensive damage in a brand new housing tract and see if they had any new damage. There was a $4.5–5 million house up here that they've been trying to sell, and I noticed that all the chimneys on the structure came down on this brand new structure, and the older ones nearby did quite well. Whereabouts is it? Oh, okay, here.
As you're speaking, we are getting yet another, maybe it's one long aftershock, I don't know, but we just felt it again and saw it on the seismograph right there, and we literally saw the needle move before we felt it. So you're right, it's taking 1, 2, 3 seconds or so to translate itself around the area. We've literally, you know, someone can be on the phone talking to you, or we can be having a conversation by microwave with a reporter and this, oh, did you feel that? No, and then 2, 3 seconds later, boom, you feel it. So this movement translating itself around the basin, around Southern California, really quite interesting and fascinating from a scientific point of view. But I can do without it, thank you.
Exactly, and you make a good point too, is that you need to keep reassessing every time you have a heavy aftershock like that, to keep reassessing the damage around your house, around your apartment, if you smell gas, you know, all of that kind of thing, so be careful. And we were looking at this a bit earlier, and this very large home on the top of the hills there sustained some major damage, and if you go, Bob was showing us earlier, on the other side of the house where most of the roof has given way.
That chimney ripped down there almost like a hot knife through some butter, and here we go again. There's some more. Every time it crowds up and gets black like that, and the amplitude, the width of that starts going like that.
Well, Caltech says it's supposed to be expected, right? Yeah. But it doesn't make it easier, does it?
Except that we're all sharing it, and maybe that does help somewhat.
Well, Chris, here you can. Well, hey, that's new right there, isn't it? I don't think it collapsed that much.
That was, well, I mean, maybe it was that was there a bit earlier, and you're right. It may have. There may be some more bricks out there that weren't there before.
A little bit further, and you know, I guess really the way to describe it, it's like when you're putting a sheet on a bed or a cover on a bed, and you wave it up in the air, and you get that rolling effect, and that's pretty much what we're feeling here as the earthquake fault line collapses a bit or moves, or the pressure is relieved by a little bit of an earthquake. It takes actually seconds for that stress to move through the valley and into Hollywood. And
Bob, hold on a second, okay?
Yeah.
Hold on a second. We want to go to Joe Avalar, who's standing by at Caltech right now. Are you there, Joe? And maybe you can tell us how big this latest aftershock was.
And I wish I could. All I can tell you is that I can see right in here the seismologists are working on it right now. As you can see, they're working on their computer screen. They're actually talking about these last aftershocks. I can also tell you, as we swing back this way, you can get an idea of where all the aftershocks were. This is the LA basin. You can see Los Angeles. This is the general area of Northridge, and you can see all the aftershocks on the screen. Now, the problem with this computer screen is if you move over here, you see the last op. This is showing at 1533. At 333, we had an aftershock of 3.8. Now, that is probably still before the main that large aftershock that you felt and I felt. But this is still pretty sizable. At 1533, 333, there was an aftershock of 3.8. And if we look back over here with this little arrow, you can see that the aftershock was right over here. Now, unfortunately, I'm not good enough to tell you exactly where in the LA basin that point is. This is the Northridge area. We're looking at the San Fernando Valley generally. This, as soon as it reads out on the computer, I'll let you know.
All right, Joe Avalar, thank you very much from Caltech. We have an old friend with us who just happened to be in town this weekend, and as a matter of fact, you went over to Universal, Geraldo, of course, Geraldo Rivera, you know him well.
And rode the big one, the earthquake.
And you rode the earthquake ride yesterday.
Children. Yeah.
So was it like?
That simulates an 8, but it was rockier in the hotel this morning.
So did you think you were having a flashback, a dream?
I did.
Did you think you were
in fact.
still asleep? Or?
Seriously, at first I thought I was dreaming about the day, and then I heard my son Gabriel, my 14-year-old, yell, "Whoa!" as if he were trying to rein in a galloping horse, and then obviously I knew I was awake and that it was an earthquake. He came running into my room, and together we weathered the first one on the Great
Were you
Big
in one
Bay.
of the high-rise towers over here?
Earlier, because we did fly this over this about 10 minutes, looking at the area. We had noticed that parking structure that had collapsed near the Kaiser Permanente building as well, and
So
we
that-
did not see this.
Yeah, that might have recently happened. Of course, also, you would get an optical illusion if you were driving along at a fair rate of speed and you didn't see
Right.
that. You might not realize that it was that big a drop.
Yes.
So that could also explain it, but that certainly is quite a picture.
I don't see any first aid personnel out there or any medical personnel, so I assume the officer...
Been through a few of these quakes, having covered a few of them, you can tell when it looks like a house is not going to be able to be saved. This one is pretty much split in half on the inside, half leaning one way, half the other. The walls are caving in. It's pretty much a total loss, a very sad one for this family. A lot of babies born here. The grandfather died here. And now the grandmother, Juanita Nere, is going to have to find another place to live. Reporting live in Westwood, Mark Brown, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Mark, thank you.
Sad.
The aftershock that we just felt struck nearly 11 hours after the initial earthquake at 4:31 a.m. this morning. Let's go out to Caltech and our Jeff Michael. Jeff, do they have a preliminary reading for us?
I think they've got a pretty good reading, Harold. That last aftershock that we felt was just written on the board. This is Dr. Jim Dolan, who's with me, by the way. 3:33 p.m., a 5.5 magnitude. That is the number that all of us have been hearing about ever since 4:30 this morning, when Dr. Kate Hutton told us that it was very possible that the large aftershock of just about a point less than the initial quake could could eventually hit. Dr. Jim Dolan is an expert in the LA Basin area as far as understanding the faults. One of the questions, Doctor, that we asked earlier was, did we know that this fault that caused the original earthquake actually existed? Had it been charted?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we have 3 potential faults. First of all, we're not sure on which of them the earthquake